Sometimes I get behind, Brother Keith, with what I do, kids. I just talk twice as fast, and I get through 15 minutes of it. There you go. You ever, it's not my name? Well, anyway, we're in the chapter 6 of our booklet. I'd like to invite you to have your booklet out. It's on page 33 of your booklet. And we're in the book of what we call the Bible. It's called Exodus. We'll be beginning about chapter 13. A few minutes on that process. We're going to begin our class with a prayer, if you bow your heads, please. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for this most beautiful day, for your great love for us. We thank you so much, Father, for the Bible, that you love us enough to take time to write to us and speak to us through your divine word. And we thank you so much that you allow us the privilege of coming together on an occasion such as this to study from your word, to learn more about the people that you have been the God over down through the years, our God in this day and age. We pray for your blessing on us tonight as we have assembled to try to increase our faith and become better and more profitable servants of thine. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. Exodus, the Jewish Exodus is our topic in our class tonight as such. And we're going to talk about the land of Egypt, and we're going to talk about the Exodus. Our book doesn't talk too much about the Exodus, so we're going to add a thing or two on that, the process. And we'll be following basically the guideline that's in our textbook that you have there. And having said that, I'd like to begin over at Numbers chapter 33, just to take a look. You know what I camp out. If someone said, where did those Israelites go when they left Egypt? Numbers chapter 3 tells you every place they went. And you don't remember that particular chapter there. In fact, if I remember correctly, the word in the very first verse says what? Somebody read verse 1, chapter 33 of the book of Numbers.
These are the journeys of the children of Israel, which went forth out of the land of Egypt with their armies under the hand of Moses and Aaron.
These are the journeys of the children of Israel. And so if you want to know where they journeyed, you won't find all those places listed in the book of Exodus, which we'll be looking at a number of this evening as such. But if you want to know how many are in there, I know how many are there because I asked my wife today, I said, you know, I counted those one time, seemed like I remember 42. And so she sat down and wrote down the names of every place. Guess how many there are? Would you believe 49? 49 places where it shows the Israelites stopped and camped there in Numbers chapter 33. So if you want to follow the children of Israel in the journeys in the wilderness, remember Numbers chapter 33. And you'll have that in a good way. We're going to look at several verses back in chapters 13 through 19 in the book of Exodus tonight in the process. And so get my point here. My mind. Egypt. If you think about Egypt, tell me one or two things you think about Egypt. What comes to mind?
The Nile.
Nile River.
The Pharaoh.
Pharaoh. Anything else? Moses. I like Moses. What about them big old triangular type things they built out in the desert? The pyramids. Those are some things which we generally think about in the process there. One of the oldest civilizations we're told there, history tells us go back at least 3,000 years BC in the process there, tells us that the descendants of people who live in Egypt really are descendants of which of Noah's 3 sons. Ham, okay. And what about the Nile River? If you didn't have the Nile River in the country of Egypt, what kind of country would you have?
Yes.
Desert. That's about the bottom line in the process there. There's a notation in your book about the size of Egypt. Talks about Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. Lower Egypt is on the upper side, and Upper Egypt's on the lower side. Lower Egypt is down on the Mediterranean Sea, where there is what we call the Delta. If you're comfortable, live up out in the hills, you call that good bottom land, I guess. And that's right, Roger. And but it's really fertile land. Rivers and waters have a way in their operation of moving soil from one place to another, and the place where it's down low gathers the rich soil as such. So the Delta, kind of a marshy swamp type place, is really a great place to go, and that's where the children of Israel live. Their book that says it's called the gift of the Nile, Egypt is, because without that river there would not really be any Egypt. Longest river in the world, right? And the next question I have is, what? How long is it? Okay. And according to the one information I got, it's 4,132 miles. That's a pretty good size river. We're told that the size of the country, our book says 9,600 square miles. But if you go and get the facts, the size of the nation of Egypt from the north to the south, that's back up from the Sudan border, mountains back down there, it's 630 miles, and then from east to west, that's 770 miles. That sounds a little bit more to me than 3,500 or 9,600 square miles. In fact, one source gave a number of 387,050 square miles. And it may be that the reference here is just simply to pick the portion, maybe, around that. The delta itself is about 150 miles inland, about 200 miles width, and that part of the country there. And so that may that, but anyway, not a small country. The coastline of the nation of Egypt, if you take in the Mediterranean coastline, and if you take in the coastline of the Gulf of Suez, and you take in the coastline of the Gulf of Aqaba, you're looking up at around 1,800 miles just in coastline altogether, that kind of. It's a pretty good sized piece of land. This delta divides into two parts of the Nile River does in the delta. One is to the west, and that's called the Pelusiac, and the other is on the east, and the other on the west is called the Canopic or Canopic, whichever one you prefer. There, those are the two main parts are there. And so Egyptians are known, their climate is dry, wet, or what? Egypt? Dry. And because of that, it provides an atmosphere for the preservance of documents and things of that nature. Last a long time as such. I don't know if mummies have anything to do with that or not, but nonetheless, that's the case, if you will. What about their engineering skills of the Egyptians? Good or bad? Good. Pretty good. We're still trying to figure out how they put those big old pyramids together, aren't we? The way that they did. And really remarkable feats of engineering in that particular place. They built a thing out there in the desert they call the Sphinx, and I guess they just wanted to be it. I heard a brother speak one time, way back when, and his hobby was Egyptology as such. And he offered the thought, and I'll just pass it on to you for whatever it's worth, he offered the thought that it could be the case that the pyramid building and all that sort of thing may have to do with the economic stress that the country was experiencing, and through the process, we got what we have right back in the World War II WW something. Work. WPA. It provide work for the people so they have something to do. We don't have any historical confirmation of that as such. It's just a thought in the process. And so Brother Hornbaker made that suggestion, so I thought I'd just pass that on to you. World Empire. There's a note in our book. This is down toward the bottom of the page on page 33, the paragraph, the next to the last paragraph. It says, it was governed by foreign kings. And it has parentheses, pharaohs. So one of these foreign kings or pharaohs is one who appointed Joseph to be second in the rule. I don't know of any biblical basis that would confirm that to be the fact as such. There was a period of time in Egyptian history, the historian tells us from about 1750 BC for a period of about 200 years, where we really don't have any documentation of Egyptian history. And the thought is because there were foreign kings who came in and took control of the country for a period of time, then the Egyptians just tried, and when they regained control, they just tried to erase all that history in the process of doing that. So I don't know. Pharaohs in the Bible are always referred to by the Egyptians as the kings. Interestingly enough, how many times did Moses refer to a king of Egypt as Pharaoh? That many, did he? Yes, sir. But they were the kings of the thing there. And the capital city was the city of Memphis, city of good abode, their say. The chief city up in the Delta area, Ramesses. Different ways of pronouncing that, I suppose. Ramesses, Ramesses. I'm going to say Ramesses. There's one place in the Bible, if you look at the mark, it only will be Ramesses, but I'm going to say Ramesses or Ramesses. If that's acceptable with you, fair enough? And the process. It was a treasure city. And who built the treasure cities? That one and another treasure city by the name of Python were built by whom? The Israelites weren't process. So those are good to do. Great, great country there. And there's another city in this country of Egypt, I guess it'd be worth mentioning. That's the city of Alexandria, which came from the days of Alexander the Great. Later on in the district where we're looking at tonight primarily. And that became a great sort of an educational center, noted for its great library. It's a place where what great document was translated out of Hebrew.
Septuagint.
The Septuagint was. And so that's a good thing to do. The Exodus, that's what we're going to look at on page 34. And page 34. I'd like to know where I'm going and how far it is to get there, you know what you mean? And if you look at the Exodus, you started a while ago, we said it begins at what place, what town, what city? Ramesses, okay, Ramesses. And of course, we're going to go down at least to Mount Sinai tonight in our thoughts and our process of doing that. And so we're going to just kind of follow along with the book of Exodus for just a little bit here in the process. And if you go back to Exodus chapter 13, Exodus 13 through 19, you'll find the record of the journeys of the Israelites out of Egyptian bondage, down to Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai, a great event happened, which was given, there was something given to Moses on the top of Mount Sinai. What was that something? Law. Let's take a brief look at our map, and I'm going to show you another slide or two. And you all think this is a walking cane, it's really a corner is what it is. Right now. This part of land right here is called the Sinai Peninsula. It's a peninsula surrounded by water. You have the Great Sea, the Mediterranean Sea to the north. You have the Gulf of Suez to the left here. And you have the Gulf of Aqaba to the right. And these both are fed out of the Red Sea, and so they actually are part of the Red Sea. To the west of that, of course, is the main body of Egypt. This also was under Egypt's control process. The west of it, the Goshen is here, where the Devil's Land is up in this area. And this around 200 miles from this up to near the city of Memphis there, which is a city also known as Nope, for Nope, N-O-P-H, there. And they're going to begin at Ramesses here. They're going to take a journey all the way down to a place called Mount Sinai. Some of the places in which they're going to be stopping at are, and you can look on your map and you might want to fill in more too. I'll look and see what your map has on it again, just to be reminded. Succoth becomes a significant place. Here's Python, which is another treasure city like Ramesses was. There's a place down here called Hiroth, and that's an interesting place. And this, as it was marked on the map that you had, is called the traditional route of the Israelites out of Egyptian captivity. I'm going to suggest to you that it's the biblical route. Reason being because the record that gives them following this particular route, which goes from Ramesses down through Succoth, Hiroth, a place called Mara, the wilderness of Shur, Elam, Dara, Elam, the wilderness of Sin, a place called Rephidim, and here's Dophah, and then on down here to the wilderness of Sinai also, Sinai wilderness in the process. That's the record the book of Exodus gives and travels down to this way. And from there they'll travel back up north out of Mount Sinai. After being there for a while, we'll figure out just how long that was in a couple of minutes. And how long? 40 years? At Mount Sinai.
2 years.
About a year. a year from here to live. From Ramesses to be settlement and staying there for almost a year, about 9 months or so. And they was, so it's on 3 months now. They got here on the 3rd month, and then they're going to be traveling north up to Tamara, Gibraltar, Hazeroth, and went on back up to a place called Kadesh Barnea, which is about 50 miles south of the borderland of southern Canaan, and out of which the 12 spies went up and to spy out the land. So, that being the case, let's see if I can figure out how to advance this. Just to get a feel for that part of the country. That worked wonderful. Okie dokie. Slide 1-5. We'll try this way. Okay. Here's a picture of Sinai Desert. By the way, the map that I handed out to you tonight, I think I have a copy of it here. This is traditional route. It doesn't have some places named on it, so you may want to put a dot in on these as we go down through here. And the reason I gave you this map in place of another, this copyright allows us to make copies of it, and so states on the map that you have. You have to be careful about violating the copyright laws. And so I would prefer to have one that had some more information on it. Sometimes you take what you get. What does that look like to you? Dead. Wow.
My garden comes in the water.
Look like Curtis Garden, he said. All right. What does that look like? More the same, doesn't it? Yeah, more the same. And you're talking about the area, you're talking about the type of country that the Israelites traveled through, folks. That's what we're trying to get before us on our mind here. Here's a picture of a kind of a space shot, I guess, of the Sinai Peninsula. And I was hoping that you could see from this a little bit more evidently the general terrain and the topography. Here's the Sinai, Mediterranean Sea, Gulf Suez, Aqaba, and on up here is going to be the Dead Sea. And there, you kind of notice the rise of the topography here. You're talking about mountainous area. I wonder, Mount Sinai, I wonder how tall that place is. I wonder about that. Let's see. 2,500 feet. Would you believe? 7,497 feet. I know where you're getting that 2,000 from, with plateaus. Yeah. At least that's one source of information. Folks, you got to go out to the Rocky Mountains to find a peak that high in this country. And you find one on this side of Mississippi. Yeah. Mount Mitchell, 6,600 and something. So, but you got to go all the way out there. And there's yet one other mountain peak in the Sinai Peninsula. It's even higher, and that's called Mount Katrina. Or sometimes it's called Mount Catherine. And there, it's over 8,000 feet. And I had that information written down somewhere, but I didn't put it down where I wrote it. And so that's kind of a picture. And then someone says, is that really Mount Sinai? Answer, it's one possibility. They don't know, you know. Now another name used for Sinai is Horeb, H-O-R-E-B. And it's a mountain range. It's kind of like Mount Ararat. You have the ranges there. And and so here is a mountain that's typical as such. And so here is one thought by people as such. And so a mountain that might feel that sort of thing in the process. And so and the plateaus that said, and I'm looking, how tall did they say those things were? 2,500 to 2,000 to 2,500 feet. I would suggest maybe some of them are going to be even more than that in the process. And you think about our own country in which we live, if you go up on Lookout Mountain, what's your elevation over there? 2,000 feet, right? And elevation here in the Chattanooga area, what would be our elevation here? I'm just wildly guessing. East Ridge, where we are right there. Anybody want to make a wild guess?
600 foot.
That's what I would guess, I think, either. Maybe 600 to 700 feet as such. Chattanooga's like they around 600 something feet. It's sort of down in a depression there. So maybe 600 to 700 feet in there. But when you get up into like the plateau, Cumberland Plateau, that's a plateau. You want to talk about a plateau. And so you're going into land and country, which is very rough country. It's not just all smooth Sahara type desert, if you will. In there's some that's filled with the mountains. And the idea of being desert means what? It's not really inhabited. There's some people who live there. There was one fellow who lived back over there really close to this place for some 40 years. Who was that? Moses did it. And so his family's over there. And if you notice on your map there, it shows that this is sort of typical. On the east there you see the word Midian. And the word Midian then is usually identified being on the east side of the Gulf of Aqaba. And it also seems to sometimes include some of the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula down around where the Sinai wilderness is in the process. One other point while you have your map there, if you don't mind. You notice at the top of the Gulf of Aqaba there's a place called Ezion-Geber. Then due north there's another body of water that's called what? The Dead Sea. And from the southern tip of the Dead Sea down to Ezion-Geber is right at 100 miles. One person said 103 miles. What is the elevation of the Dead Sea?
1,300 feet below sea level.
13 below? That what it was, Brother Archie told us last week, we forgot. 1,300 feet below sea level. What's the elevation at Ezion-Geber?
About sea level.
Sea level. You can tell the seaman back there. Sea level. And so between Ezion-Geber and the Dead Sea there, you're talking about an elevation change from 1,300 to sea level. Now going north from Ezion-Geber up for about 40 miles or so, almost halfway up, elevation is going to increase to a little bit over 700 feet, so we're told. And then it's going to smooth off, of course, as we climb back down into the 1,300 below sea level altitude. And so when you talk about the Israelites walking through the wilderness for 40 years, then it says it weren't no picnic to get around that great number of people in the process. Something to think about. I'm going to back up again into the map, just in case you'd like to see that on there. No wonder the Israelites, I can almost begin to have a little sympathy on the murmur of the Israelites because they didn't have any water. Because they didn't have it. Let's turn to the book of Exodus. The book of Exodus. We just noted earlier in our class in the book of Numbers, chapter 33 and verse 1, that they departed from Ramesses on the first month, 15th day of the month. What happened on the first month, the 14th day of the month? Passover. First Passover observed. Talking about the idea of the Lord having finished the 10 plagues and brought upon Pharaoh and the Egyptians as such. And so they departed from Ramesses and they pitched in a place called Succoth. Succoth. Is that on your map?
Yes.
All right. They got one on there. That's pretty good. And now on down to chapter 13 and verse 17, it says something about the travel. What way did they not go? The way of the Philistines. If you'll notice, it doesn't show it on this map, yours ain't good. But there are three major trade routes going north, and one coming across the peninsula here. But there's one that goes up by the Mediterranean Sea, usually called the way of the Philistines. That trade route goes all the way up to the city of Damascus and such. There's another trade route that comes out of Egypt over here. This is called the Wilderness of Shur, and it's called the Way of Shur, S-H-U-R. It comes up and goes up through the mainland of the hill country of Palestine, or Canaan. And it ends up in what city? Damascus. And there's another one that really starts from down here and goes all the way up the east side of the Gulf, or the Araba here, and up on the east side of the Dead Sea, and the east side of the Sea of Galilee, and it ends up at the city of Damascus. How about that? You have three major routes as such. And so the travel from Damascus, the northern part of Palestine, in that area up in there, down to the through Canaan, through Palestine, through Canaan, and on down. If you look over here from this area over here back over to the Dead Sea, on about basically 200 miles travel. And if I was going to travel with a great number of people out of Ramesses, and I was going to go up here to the land that God promised me, which route would I pick?
Shortest.
I'd take this one right here. Why? It says it's the shortest, it's the easiest. And that's the way we are.
Beside water.
Huh?
Beside water.
Beside water?
That's probably why they
Yeah,
went.
boy. There's such. And there's a place here called the River of Egypt which goes down. That's usually considered to be the border of Egypt on this side. And it's on the part of this. And it comes, and then on across, here's this area, southern part of Palestine here. There are some different wildernesses identified in that. You may not have all, but he says there's 5. You can count a little bit more than that if you want to, or a little less than that. You got Zen and Sin. That'll be easy enough. Zen and Sin. Zen's always on top of sin, right? Zen is the very northern part of the wilderness, and it provides a southern border for God's proper for Canaan. Really. The wilderness is Zen. Sin is down here near Mount Sinai. In fact, there's a wilderness in Sinai also identified right here. That here's the wilderness of Shur. When they first come out, they're going to come over into this wilderness, this Shur. They're going to find there's not any water. They're going to come to a place down here called Marah. If you don't have that in on your map, you might just put a dot in there. If you kind of notice a little bend on the east-west side of the Suez there, right directly across, you're going to put a little dot there. You can put Marah right there. And they have here the wilderness of Ephraim here. You'll find in the process of looking around, this Ephraim has been moved and identified to various places on maps. In the process of preparing for our class, I've seen Ephraim up here in Egypt. I've seen Ephraim here. I've seen Ephraim over here on the east side of the Sinai Peninsula. But the biblical record being consistent with where they're traveling, I think the idea of Ephraim here, where they would cross it, across the sea into this wilderness here. And then below Marah, there's a place called Elam. That's a short distance. I'll give you that distance in just a moment. And then they come on down. The next place identified in Exodus is on down to Rephidim. Dophka is not mentioned in the Exodus listing in the process. So those are the general area. This is how who's traveling this journey? How many folks are out there? Couple million?
Bunch.
At least, in the process. And really some great thoughts, I think, to go with this if we just stop and give it some consideration in the process. And I'm going to travel from Ramesses down to Mount Sinai, total mileage basically around 200 miles. 200 miles. The Israelites may have said, let's go the way of the Philistines. The Lord says, no. If you go that way, something's going to happen. What's going to happen? You remember the story? War. Going to have what, Keith? War. If they get up there and find themselves having to go to battle of war, what's going to happen to their mindset?
Let's go on.
They're going to they say, hey, we don't want this. They're going to turn around and go back. Okay? Chicken out. And so the Lord says, no, we're going to go my way. Sometimes the Lord's way may not always seem to be the best way to us, but it's always the best way for us. As Isaiah said, my way is not your way, neither my thoughts your thoughts, said the Lord. And so here's we're learning those great lessons in the process of following them out and going through it. Going from Ramesses down to Succoth. About 30 miles. Someone says, how did you know that? Well, this map that I handed you is short of a very critical piece of information. That very critical piece of information is a chart that tells you the distance, what distance is. What do you call it?
Scale.
Scale, thank you. At a scale. And so if you take your handy dandy little ruler and read that scale, you can sit down and go to two places there with God. You kind of get pretty close to where you're going, right?
Yes, sir.
And so that's one way of doing it. And so I'm sorry that this map doesn't have a scale on it, but anyway, it's about 30 miles. And Succoth on down to, where was the next place? Let's just look at it right quick.
Or 5 minutes per run.
Verse 20. Etham. They took their journey from Succoth and camped at Etham, the edge of the wilderness. And so it's on probably about 15 miles. And then from Ephraim down to Marah is about 70 miles.
What chapter are we in? 'Cause I have it
We're in chapter 13, 20. We go from Succoth to Etham. In chapter 14 and 20. By the way, 14 and 2, it says they turned and encamped before Piroth, between Migdol and Sea, over against Baal-zephon. Baal-zephon's another one of those places where you'll find located in different places, and sometimes way back up in the land of Goshen, and sometimes back down closer to the Red Sea in the process there. And while they were there, that's where the Egyptians pursued them, if you will, and they caught them at the Red Sea. And they thought they had them, and the Israelites thought that they'd been had until the Lord did deliver them. And so in chapter 14, the latter part, we have the record where the Lord divided the waters of the Red Sea, and the Israelites went across on dry ground. And the Egyptians, assailing to do so with their 600 chariots and soldiers, what happened to them? They were drowned. So that put an end to that flight, if you will. And so, chapter 15 and 22 says, Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. And you can see Shur there, I think, on your map pretty good. That's just on the east side. That little body of water, it's at the top of the Gulf of Suez, and there's a short land connect, and then there's a small body of water. It's sometimes called Bitterness Lake, Bitter Waters, Great Bitter Lake. Some maps you'll see that open with the waters being connected between that and the Suez Canal. This particular map does not show it open as a process. And so,
Is that where the water was bitter and they had?
it's getting about there, chapter 15, and about verse 22. Moses brought Israel from the Red Sea and went out into the wilderness of Shur. In a 3 days' journey, they found no water. But when they came to Marah, they couldn't drink the water there because why?
Bitter.
Bitter. That's what the word Marah means, is bitterness. And so they had to fix that. So God fixed the bitter water. What did he tell Moses to do?
strike the rock.
Yeah, not to strike the rock later, you get to strike the rock struck. Here you have a tree handy. Take the tree and throw it in the water became Sweetwater. I believe you have a chance to name that place is Sweetwater, don't you? Sweetwater. So that's in 15. People murmured. People, can you believe that? They murmured. Chapter 15 on down to 27, they came to Elam. There they found how many wells of water? Well, how many palm trees?
70.
You got palm trees and water, that's a good place to do what? Good place to camp. So that's what they did. Took their journey from there, chapter 16 and verse 1, came to the wilderness of Sin. Got on down pretty close to Sinai. And Sin is the wilderness which is between Elam and Sinai. And so Ephraim to Morah is 70 miles. From Morah to Elam is only about 15 miles. And now they're going on down to a place called Rephidim. And look at verse chapter 16 before we get to Rephidim, in verse 1. And tells us today that we have a time factor here. On the 15th day of the second month, after departing out of the land of Egypt, they came to Elam. How many days have been traveling? If 1 month is 30 days, and 15 days would be 45 days, would it? So they've been on the road now for 45 days. Hungry. And so this is a place where the Lord is going to feed them. In the evening, He's going to feed them with some flesh, quail specifically. And in the morning, He's going to feed them with some bread, which is otherwise known as manna. They're going to eat manna for 40 years. They'll eat manna all the way up to the time until they enter into the land of Canaan. The record being, going back over with Joshua chapter 5, gives notation when the manna stopped. They were already in the land again. 17 and verse 1. Journey from the wilderness of Sin, pitched in Rephidim. Now from Ephraim to Rephidim will be about 60 miles. And then from Rephidim on down to Mount Sinai is only about 10 miles crossing. But at Rephidim they murmured. This is where they murmured because they didn't have any water. This is where God told Moses to do what with the rock? Smite it. And the process. We're not going to fix anything. And smite the rock. And so they did. And smote the rock with his rod, water came out of it. So they call the place Massa, meaning temptation or trial, and Meribah, meaning contention. And so, chapter 19 and verse 1, we have another time factor. What day did they come into the wilderness of Sinai? We're talking about the land that's at the foot of the mountains there.
On the third.
The third month.
Yeah, 13th, third month, same day. I take that to mean the 15th of the month. It's the same day that they left on the same day of the month. And so it's 3 months journey from Ramesses to Sinai, 200 miles. And did it in 3 months. On foot. And 2 million more of them it's going. And pitched in the wilderness, it said there, and there Israel camped before the mount. Now turn over to chapter 40 for just a moment. The last chapter of the book of Exodus. Around about verse 17. A great event took place. Again, we have another time factor. This time here is the first month in the second year, on the first day of the month, what happened? Tabernacle. So 11 and a half months after they left is what it is. And the tabernacle was raised up. And back in the book of Exodus, after we get past chapter 19, chapter 20, of course, we have the Ten Commandments. And then we get instructions about, you know, how to offer sacrifices, how to construct the tabernacle, and all that sort of thing. And then we get to the end of the book, we have a record and a time factor relative to their fact being there at Mount Sinai in the desert, the wilderness there. And it's been, fellow says, within 15 days of a full year's time. And while you're there, let's go on over on chapter, in the book of Numbers again, if you don't mind, chapter 10. Numbers chapter 10. And we're going to look at verse 11. We have another dated event. What date is this? The 20th day of what month? What year? Second year. What happened?
Cloud was taken up.
Cloud was taken up off the tabernacle. When the cloud's taken up off the tabernacle, what's going to happen? Down to move. Down to move. So they've been down there for, this is the second year, and there. And it's the 20th day of the second year, and it's the second month, and so that's 1 year. Was that a month and 20 days? Is that figure out right? Get me out on that.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And so they've been down there, they've been at Mount Sinai. Moses has been up on Mount Sinai a couple of times, gotten the law twice already, really. Come back down, the Israelites already tried to go back to that calf worship during this period of time. And now they finally have the tabernacle up, God's presence over is there. And when the cloud moves up, which is indicative of His presence, and they're fixing to move, and they're going somewhere, are they not? And what about verse 12? Where are they going?
Into the wilderness.
Wilderness of Sinai, out of the wilderness of Sinai, and then the cloud rested in the wilderness of Paran. And Paran is an interesting place. And whoops, daisy. Right here is the north end of the Gulf of Aqaba, Ezion Geber. You go straight across over here to Tyros, kind of where they cross the Red Sea, right in that area right there, across that. And you have the wilderness of Paran, and this is just south of the wilderness of Zin, Paran, Shur, Etham, and some people think that Etham might be the same as Shur, so reply if you manage that. And here's the peninsula. And the Sinai wilderness. It is also, a phrase talks about the wilderness by the Red Sea, comes down too, it's not on the maps. And Paran. Or is there a better way of saying that? Tell me. Okay, Numbers 10:33. It says they departed from the mount, that's Mount Sinai, 3 days' journey. The ark of the covenant of the Lord went before them in a 3 days' journey, searched out a resting place for them. And so the Lord was up on them a day, and when they went out of camp, it came to pass, the ark set forward, Moses said, rise up, let your enemies be scattered, and let them hate, that hate thee flee before thee. And so we're going forward. Now then, let's go on down to chapter 11. Verse 1, the people did what?
Complain.
Now we're going to be complaining. It's not time to get, is it? Doesn't get it, man. Anyway, what they're going to do, they're going to be here at a place called Taberah, and they're going to lose some people there because they're complaining and murmuring, and they go up to a place called Kibroth Hattaavah, and then they're going there up to Kadesh Barnea, and in this place here where they're gonna be, they'll be sending spies up in the land of Canaan. And coming back, because of disbelief, they're gonna be committed to 40 years in the wilderness, the process. And at the proper time, when God sets forth, they will come forth, not the short route by through Edom, because Edom would not allow it, but they had to come back down to the south of Edom and come up on the east side of Moab, and go into Sihon, the king of Amorite, back up to the top of the Dead Sea on the east side. I have a note from Brother Gilbert for you. Here's a note from Brother Gilbert. May 24. Fill out mountain from page 36, handout in class. Do we have that?
Are we turning it in, or are we?
I think we just fill it out in the booklet there, Carla, was my thought. That's what I did with mine anyway. Number two. Homework. Uh-oh. Make a map of the land allotments to the tribes of Israel. Kind of an interesting assignment because Exodus book chapter 6 really doesn't have anything to do with the allotments of the tribes of Israel. But you can get them and work on those process. So. Make them on. Question, comment? Well, thank you for allowing me to be part of your class, Brother. I enjoyed it, and you endured it very well. I'm proud of you.